Hi everybody, so we're going to look at some statistics in the media this week. So you've got links to 5 articles and I'm going to work through 5 questions. So the first one we're going to look at is broadband demands surges from the ABS. It's the first link that you've got on your learning brief this week for the week's work. So if you haven't read it, then just pause. Read it, it's not very long as you can see here, and then come back to me. Okay, so as you can see in the article, it's a very short one, it's full of statistics. So the first question that I ask you is to identify the statistics that were presented in the article. So we're going to do this together. So all I've done is I've gone through and I've highlighted them, and when I feel like the topic or the content of those statistics has changed or the focus, I've used a different colour. So as I was reading through, I discovered that they talked here about total volume of data download, and so I highlighted some of the statistics here. This one is a little confusing because they talk about the June quarter and how that's up from the December quarter when they're 6 months apart. So we've missed out an entire quarter between those two. And then they talk about the corresponding period from a year before. I think we're to assume that's based on the June quarter, but it could be from the December one, and we really don't know. They give us some more data here, so even though this sentence is full of numbers, there's actually no statistics there that we need to concern ourselves with right now. The next statistics that come up is around this fixed line broadband. They say that's 93.9% of all downloads. This is still green because we're still talking about fixed lines, and then they go and talk about those same time periods. So we've got the June quarter, the December, and then the previous corresponding period from the previous year. Now they don't give us the numbers here. They gave us an original number here in the total downloads, and everything since then has been percentages. 20%, 51, 94, so we'll have to work some stuff out a bit later if we needed to do some analysis of it. The last bit of statistics that I've interested in here is mobile wireless downloads, and they just say that it's increased in this particular periods. They say respective periods when we're talking about 3 different periods, but they've given us 2 numbers. So we're not really entirely sure around which 2 they might pertain to. So as you can see, just reading the article, it seems to flow well, it's written well, there's a lot of statistics there. You get to the end, the punchline is of course that we more people are downloading on a fixed line network, so hurry up with the broadband and the NBN. And the statistics as we've read them seem to justify that. And that's what the purpose of our 5 questions will be, is to identify if that is indeed the case. Now the next component is to write a summary of these statistics. So in this first table, what you'll see is I've just written the numbers as they were written in the article. So the total downloads, this was up 20%, so that means in that December quarter it's 20% less than this. And it's up 51% from the year before, so then it needs to be that much percent less to work it out. They gave us some statistics about fixed lines, so I've written those in as well. And they've given some information about mobile wireless. As you can see, this is not a full picture. We still have a lot of questions. Firstly, we're not looking at corresponding quarters. We've missed out an entire quarter in the middle. We don't know any more information about wireless, mobile wireless here, so it's going to be difficult to extrapolate information from that. And they give us one amount of data, and then they talk percentages for the rest. What I've done in the second table is then, so I've got something that I can actually tangibly compare. What I've done is I've worked out what these values would be using percentages, and so we've done a unit on percentages now. So this should be mathematics that you're capable of. So if it's 20% less than this, then I can just multiply it by 0.8, because 80% of something is the 20% less. So that's using this idea of complementary numbers where the 80% and the 20% both give me the total. Another way would be to work out 20% and then subtract it. So there's 2 steps in that one, or 1 step using my calculation. So now I've got some numbers I can see. I've got the 414,000, 331, 202. Similarly with the fixed line and mobile wireless, we really don't know. It just says up 9.3%, but of what? What was the original? We just know it's up. And does that mean it's up in the June quarter from the December, or up on the June quarter from the previous quarter that we have no information about? So there's still some subtleties that we're unaware of. So continuing with our statistical analysis here, then what we want to do is we want to identify if we think the claims made in the article are consistent with the statistics that have been provided in the article. So now we need to go and find the claims. So I've done the same thing again. I've gone through and I've highlighted 3 different claims I can see in this article. The first claim they make is that these figures underlie the need for a national broadband network. That's one claim. They're saying, here's all these numbers, therefore we need an NBN. The second claim is that more people are downloading over fixed line networks. And then the third claim is that, therefore, we need to upgrade our telecommunications infrastructure if we're to keep up with our ever-growing appetite for information. So there's 3 claims here. Let's unpick those. The first one. Do the figures underlie a need for an NBN network? That's the question we're asking ourselves. So how do these figures highlight the need for an NBN? What they do, these figures, is they highlight that more people are downloading. They're doing it from fixed line networks. The NBN is a fixed line network. It's a cable-oriented network that's going to be rolled out around Australia. So the link that they're making is because the need is growing, therefore we need an NBN. There are probably lots of other figures that might also show that. For example, is our growth or rate of growth higher or lower than other countries? How is our usage compared to other countries? If other countries are lower and they don't have an NBN but they have a good network, they're questions we could be asking. This next claim is that more people are downloading data. Now that's an easy one to answer because they answer that directly. There's no interpretation we need to make here. 93.9% of all downloads were fixed line. So that is most people, because 93.9% is a lot of people. And this third one is very subjective. They've obviously had an opinion. They've gathered some data that they feel supports it. And then we can get to this is like the punchline, it's the end of the article. Therefore, we need to upgrade if we're going to keep up. This encourages societal need, societal support, a call for action, probably to lean on the government in some way because they're the ones who are rolling this out. So, is the data directly saying what's highlighted here in this blue claim? No, not really, because we don't have data about who we're trying to keep up with. So in that case I would say this claim is not supported, not directly from the statistics. So the fourth question we're going to ask is, what's the purpose of linking the claims to the statistics? So why have the statistics in there? Why not just have an article where they state their claims and say therefore roll on the NBN? So here are some possible reasons, and these are pretty common reasons that articles are written based on statistics. It makes them more credible or believable. Reduces the subjectivity. It means we can be more focused on supporting, in this particular case, the need of people. We want these people to have access to the data that they're trying to download, and we want that to be with reasonable speeds. So without the statistics in this particular article, we may not be as convinced as we were with the statistics in there. The last question is, what sources were the statistics drawn from? And that's always a very important question. How do they know? Where did they get this information from? Is it credible? So the article claims in the first sentence that the statistics were released from the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics. So that's a credible source. But then the secondary question is, well, how do they get the data? Was it a government-funded survey? How many people did they ask? How did they get this information about how much data? Which ISPs were involved? Which ISPs weren't? Is it indicative of the actual population? So we would hope that because it's from a credible source that those questions have been considered. If the source had just been a researcher or even a marketing company that does publicise reports and statistics often, then we might want to dig deeper about the questions that I've just mentioned. How did they get that data? How can we believe what's being told to us? And just because the numbers on a page does not make them automatically believable. Okay, so the next article we're going to have a quick look at is the one titled, "We May Be Getting Smarter, but More Animals Are Under Threat." So again, if you haven't had a chance to read this one, do that now and come back to me. Maybe whilst you're reading it through, you could identify yourself the statistics that are presented, and we'll see how we go with the statistics that I find. Okay, so let's find the statistics that are presented in this article. The question 2 says to write up a summary of these. So as we read through the article, there's lots of numbers, I can see that already. So what we're looking for are statistics that might be linked to this heading, but often the first sentence is fairly important too. Gives us a bit of a summary about what the article's about. So we're looking at a 10-year compilation as we scroll through here. So here's our first one. Life expectancy has increased. That would be our first one. And they give us some statistics here, what the actual life expectancies are now for girls and boys. A proportion of people with a bachelor degree or above has increased. That's our second element of statistics. The next few paragraphs here talk about income, how financially sustainable our population is. Here's one about our entire population, that 3 million people have extra 3 million over the last 10 years, which is up 15%. Some numbers here around the statistics of citizenship and whether they were born here in Australia or born overseas. There's some numbers on the last few paragraphs here around numbers of threatened species, and they're our statistics. So not every sentence with a number is a statistic. For example, this one isn't. It's part of our summary and closing. Okay, so a summary of these statistics. These are the statistics that I've found. That over the previous 10 years, because that's what the article's focusing on, the life expectancy for girls, for boys, the quality of education, the entire population, the number of Australian citizens, and the threatened species and plants. So there are our statistics. I had some questions as I was highlighting these. For example, they say that the number of people with bachelor's degrees, the proportion of people, has up 20%. So is that 20% of people who are working? Is that 20% of people, an extra 20% of people who were old enough to have a degree in the first place, or just of the entire population? If it's of the entire population, is it reasonable to use that figure? Maybe they're not having as many babies, therefore that could be an inflated figure of 20% of people who are in the age bracket where they could be having degrees. So I had some questions about how they measured that. I had a question here around the entire population. They said it was up 15%, that we've added 3 million people. And does that mean that 15% is the 3 million? So that you could do some simple maths to try and confirm that for yourself. If 15% is 3 million, you might want to ask yourself what 100% would be. It ends up being 2 billion. So was the population 2 billion 10 years ago? Those sorts of things. I had some questions around the non-Australian born citizens. It says that there were less now than there were 10 years ago, but they haven't given us any other supporting numbers. They're just saying less. They haven't given us a percentage. So the reason that they might do that is because maybe it is less, but maybe it's 0.2% less. Maybe it's less and maybe it's 85% less. So maybe if it's in those extremes, they don't want to be seen to be supporting a cause in one way or the other about Australian citizenship. So our next thing is do you think the claims made in the article were consistent with the statistics provided? This is a fairly simple article because there are some very simple claims. Let's have a look. That we're fitter, smarter and less productive. So fitter is not mentioned in the article, so I would say that that is a claim that is not supported anywhere. There's nothing about our actual ability to be fit and active. It says that our life expectancy has increased. Do we assume that's because we're fitter? We might assume that's because we have better access to medical care, that we have better access to drugs that weren't available 10 to 15, 20 years ago. So is the correlation straight from life expectancy to fitter reasonable? It says that we are now smarter. Well, the only thing that talks in this article, the only statistics that back that up are around our relation to degrees. Is a measure of a degree or a postgraduate degree or higher education the only way that you can measure how smart a population is? It might be, for example, a situation where they could not get a job doing something that they wanted to do, so they decided that they will continue studying. We now have forced legislation that says you must be in gainful employment or studying. So if you don't get the gainful employment that you're looking for, maybe you study. I'm not sure philosophically that a measure of a smartness of a population or intelligence of a population can be measured just by looking at how many people have a degree. The other thing that it also talks about here is the environment. It says a less pristine environment. So it's a stretch from their statement that it's less pristine to the fact that now more plants and animals are threatened. Are they threatened because of the way the environment is? The statistics that they've put into this article do not support that directly. You might have other readings or other knowledge that do support that, and then you would support that this claim is true. But we're looking for, are the claims that they're making directly related to the statistics that they've provided? The next claim showing that we are living longer. Yes, that is supported. That's already in there. The better money is supported. That's in those paragraphs through the middle. And that more of us are finishing our diplomas and degrees, again, not directly supported. That's not enough information to tell. This says that more of us are finishing our degrees. That implies a measure of how many started and then how many finished from 10 years ago to today. And those statistics are not within this article. More claims are that the nation is diminished. I've already discussed that one. And then there's some claims here from the World Wildlife Fund about the number of threatened animal and plant species. And this is an opinion of a third party, so whilst it's a claim, it's not necessarily needed to be supported by the statistics within the article. They've found it relevant and they've posted those quotes in here. So again, the purpose of linking the claims to the statistics is around the idea of adding strength, adding believability, supporting the claims, and building an argument for or against, or to tell a story. This would lead us on to discussions about bias. Do you think that this particular author is biased in one direction or another? So we might look at the title, Getting Smarter but More Animals Are Under Threat. So the two things that they've picked up on are we're smarter but we're still not doing right by the animals. Is there a bias there towards that? There wasn't more statistics in here about the animals than there was about other things. It wasn't the only thing that was negative either. We had a drop in the number of non-Australian born citizens than we did 10 years ago. So you might ask if that's one of the particular biases, or if that's a way of trying to encourage readership. Maybe it's popular in the news and in the media, maybe it's a contemporary, maybe it's a popular issue, maybe articles with those particular headings will draw more viewers and readers to their particular site or newspaper. So you can see how these are very short articles. They're very common to find these sorts of articles in newspapers, and just with our simple 5-question statistical analysis overview, we can ask ourselves some pretty serious questions about the relevance and how believable we believe their data to be. Again, the source of this, it says, is from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, so we would believe that to be a credible source. It's a 10-year compilation of statistics, so they've given us more information in this article than the last around how they've come up with the data. And they've also given us the name and a role of a person who's particularly been related to this, the ABS Director of Social and Progress Reporting. So it gives us somewhere else we could go. We could go and look up this particular person, her role, this particular section of the department, and probably find access to more of this particular report. Okay, so your turn now. So there are 3 articles left from the links. I'd like you to pick at least one. One would be good to work through on your own, and then a second one to sort of highlight areas that you found difficult. So you could just concentrate on looking for things that you might question, or looking for the claims or something like that. So here are the 5 questions. You identify the statistics and then you write a summary of those. That pulls out the numbers, makes it less subjective with all the literacy component that surrounds it, with all the emotive language that they may or may not use. So if you've just got a summary of the statistics, it's easier to refer and keep it removed from a certain person's bias or emotion as they've been writing the article. Ask yourself, do you think the claims were made are consistent with those statistics? Of course, like I've said, it doesn't mean that your extra reading or your extra knowledge in particular contemporary issues might also add believability, or you might add weight to the claims that are being made, because you might already know other information. So this question is just, are the statistics provided enough to validate the claims that are there? So you might, yes, believe that those claims are true because of other existing knowledge, but maybe the statistics they've provided don't necessarily prove that on their own. Ask yourself, why do you think they've particularly used those statistics? Mostly, like I've been saying, it's because of these particular things. Credible, believability, subjectivity, to support an argument, those sorts of things. And then always ask yourself, where has this data come from? Is that source credible? So as you can see, interpreting statistics in the media, it's not something that we consciously necessarily do every time we're reading an article, but it is something that we need to be conscious and aware of. Our Australian curriculum introduces this idea of statistical literacy and statistical analysis much earlier than what was existing in a lot of states. This sort of conversation around what are the statistics, can we get a summary? Do you think these questions will be being asked in grades 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6? The context of the articles might be different. But looking for what is the statistics, is that validated, is the claim they've made validated by those statistics? That's the analysis and the awareness that we're trying to introduce into our younger population. So it's really important that we're aware of these things ourselves, and that we're quite practiced and rehearsed at being able to pull apart an article, get a feel for what's in there, put it back together and have an opinion on it. So that's great. I'll see you all the week after for probability. Okay, bye.